8 years ago, we shared a piece that is certainly a classic. It's called The Cab Ride, and it's written by the cab driver. And I'm going to share this with you right now. The cab driver says, 20 years ago, I drove a cab for a living. When I arrived at 2:30 a.m., the building was dark except for a single light in the ground floor window. Under these circumstances, many drivers would just honk once or twice, wait a minute, and then drive away. But I had seen too many impoverished people who depend on taxis as their only means of transportation. Unless a situation smelled of danger, I always went to the door. This passenger might be someone who needed assistance, I reasoned to myself. And so I walked to the door and I knocked. "Wait a minute," a voice came from behind the door, a frail, elderly voice. I could hear something being dragged across the floor. After a long pause, the door opened. A small woman in her 80s stood before me. She was wearing a print dress and a pillbox hat with a veil pinned on it, like someone out of a 1940s movie. By her side was a small nylon suitcase. The apartment looked as if no one had lived in it for years. All the furniture was covered with sheets. There were no clocks on the walls, no knickknacks or utensils on the counters. In the corner was a cardboard box filled with photos and glassware. "Would you carry that bag out to the car for me?" she asked. I took the suitcase to the cab and then returned to assist the woman. She took my arm and we walked slowly to the curb. She kept thanking me for my kindness. "Oh, it's nothing," I told her. "I just try to treat my passengers the way that I would want my own mother treated." "You're such a good boy," she said. When we got into the cab, she gave me an address and then asked, "Could you drive through the downtown?" "Well, it's not the shortest way," I answered quickly. "Oh," she said, "I don't mind. I'm in no hurry. I'm on my way to hospice." I looked in the rearview mirror, and her eyes were glistening. "I don't have any family left," she continued. "The doctor says I don't have very long." And I quietly reached over, and I shut off the meter. "What route would you like to take?" I asked. And for the next 2 hours, we drove through the city. She showed me the building where she had once worked as an elevator operator. We drove through the neighborhood where she and her husband had lived when they were newlyweds. She had me pull up to the front of a furniture warehouse that had once been a ballroom where she had gone dancing as a girl. Sometimes she'd ask me to slow down in front of a particular building or a corner and would just sit staring into the darkness, saying nothing. As the first hint of sun was creasing the horizon, she suddenly said, "I'm tired. Let's go now." We drove in silence to the address that she had given me. It was a low building like a convalescent home, with a driveway that passed under a portico. 2 orderlies came out to the cab as soon as we pulled up. They were very businesslike and intent, watching her every move. They must have been expecting her for some time. I opened the trunk and took the small suitcase to the door. The woman was already seated in a wheelchair. She looked up at me and she said, "How much do I owe you?" and she reached into her purse. "Nothing," I said. "Nothing." "You have to make a living," she answered. "There are other passengers," I responded. Almost without thinking, I bent over to give her a hug, and she held on to me tightly. "You gave an old woman a moment of joy," she said. "Thank you." I squeezed her hand, and then I walked into the morning light. Behind me, a door shut. It was the sound of the closing of a life. I didn't pick up any more passengers that shift. I drove aimlessly, lost in thought. For the rest of the day, I could hardly talk. What if that woman had gotten an angry driver or one who was impatient to end his shift? What if I had refused to take the run or had honked just once and then driven away? On quick review, I don't think that I have done anything more important in my entire life. We're conditioned to think that our lives revolve around great moments, but great moments often catch us unaware, beautifully trapped in what others may consider a small one. God bless your day, my friend.